Good morning, I'm Jason Corey, and welcome to another episode of Talking Tech, where we cut through the fluff and talk about emerging technology and how it's relevant for you in the government. We're shooting today from Red Hat's public sector headquarters in McLean, Virginia. I'm joined by John Osborne and Chuck Svizboda, and our topic today is Kubernetes, and more particular, how to orchestrate containers with Kubernetes. So before we get started today, let's do quick introductions. John, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm a senior developer advocate here at Red Hat. Essentially what that means is I help customers adopt open source technologies in the emerging tech space, most commonly with containers, but also with middleware as well.
Great, appreciate you joining us. Chuck?
Chuck Svizboda, OpenShift practice lead, public sector, anything and all things, containers, OpenShift, DevOps, etc. But my trade is actually software development. I've got over 10 years in my belt, and funny enough, a lot of it's in .NET. Working at Red Hat, that's kind of funny.
Good stuff, it's funny. Yeah. So for those of you that tuned into previous episodes, we did do one on microservices and on containers. This one will be complementary to that. So we like to start out every episode of Talking Tech just with some foundational education. So John, can you give us a little bit of a description of like what is Kubernetes and maybe some of the history?
Yeah, sure. So Kubernetes is an orchestration technology that's fully open sourced, spun out of Google. They recently came out a couple years ago and said they'd only been running containers for the last couple years. They'd never run virtual machines. And they had their own container format called Let Me Containerize That For You. If you're familiar with the site, Let Me Google That For You. It was kind of spun out of that idea. They'd been running that scale with their board project was their orchestration engine. When Docker came around and got really popular, they said, you know, this is really easy to use for developers. Let's build a new technology for orchestration around that. So they came out and open sourced Kubernetes a couple of years ago. It's got tons of contributors. It was in the top like 0.001 most popular projects on GitHub. Red Hat's actually the #2 contributor behind Google now for Kubernetes.
Nice. So on last episode, we talked about what a container was in terms of a way to package your application and both a runtime. And we determined that most people in the government are adopting containers for either typically app portability reasons, whether it's just different infrastructures, even public clouds. And then we also talked about some of the density benefits. So just like people used to adopt virtualization to get higher density on their workloads on their hardware footprint, containers were a good reason for that. So once you've decided you're going to adopt containers, Chuck, what's the next step in that? Is that where like an orchestration tool comes in? And can you describe if you were a CIO, what some of your thought process?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of joke, containers are so hot right now, right? A lot of folks think that containers are a silver bullet for the organization. In fact, I hear, a lot of senior level folks are like, hey, I got a storage problem, I'll rub some containers on it, or an app dev problem, I'll rub some containers on it. And generally, that might be okay, but once you get beyond, 5, 6 containers, or even 500, you need a container management tier, and that is what Kubernetes does, right? So, for instance, microservices architecture is a big thing right now in terms of decomposing traditional or monolithic applications. Taking a monolithic application and scaling it to about 7 nodes or what have you, for capacity reasons, while it might be a bear to update and a bear to move around, it's actually pretty easy to manage only 7 copies of it. So when you start decomposing microservices into container, now you have one monolith that's now 10,000 microservices. You cannot do that on your own, right? So you need a container management platform on top of that, and that is what Kubernetes does. Kubernetes is the way to take your workloads, schedule them in the right resources, orchestrate them together, provide logical routing to them, et cetera. So that they are actually managing 10,000 containers is just as easy as managing one.
Got it. So John, I heard you say what Kubernetes was. I heard you say Google's involvement. So I know we're shooting today from Red Hat, and you're a Red Hat employee, so am I. What exactly is Red Hat doing in the container orchestration space, and even Kubernetes community in general?
Yeah, so Red Hat's actually driving some of the standards behind not only Docker and the Open Container Initiative, but Kubernetes as well. So specifically with Kubernetes, like Kubernetes 1.3 came out with all sorts of new functionality, and Red Hat was leading the space in a lot of those. Worked on things like horizontal scaling, so if your pod or container gets pegged with CPU, we can just spin up another one, add to that. Worked on things like pet sets, which is really big for stateful applications like traditional legacy applications, where you actually might have a startup sequence. So that's really common, especially in public sector, with as we move like traditional apps to containers. They might have, okay, my database has to be started before my middleware tier needs to be started before my front end tier. They can't start up auto order, so that's what PetSets provides. And other features like that they've been trying to bring more enterprise, traditional, make it more easy to consume for the enterprise.
Got it.
Sets like that. So.
And then a previous episode, we talked about containers and particularly how to containerize legacy apps. And during that session, we learned that there was something called OpenShift that was a way to deliver both an enterprise Linux distribution, which is required for containers, Docker, which we've discussed being the format and runtime, and then Kubernetes. Chuck, can you talk about how you've seen OpenShift be used in at least the federal government and what some of the value has been for clients?
Sure. So, the Kubernetes community is enormous. There's us, there's Google, there's CoreOS, even IBM, SAP, and Huawei, Fujitsu, and countless other companies are in there contributing code to it, right? I kind of joke with, that the Kubernetes community moves so quickly. It's hockey sticking in terms of features and functions. With Red Hat, what Red Hat does is, like a lot of our other projects that we contribute to, is we take the upstream, so the Kubernetes community, we find a good stopping point, we test the heck out of it, and then add on a bit of our secret sauce, which is also open source, and then push it out to the community as a product. So OpenShift is actually enterprise-grade Kubernetes, and then a whole lot more. And what that whole lot more is things that makes it more accessible. So think of it as an easy button. So Kubernetes is very flexible in terms of adapting to your infrastructure and the workloads that you could use. But at the same time, that adds some complexity to it. So for example, what OpenShift enables you to do is say, hey, developer, here's my code. Here is my binary, my war, my jar, whatever. Just take it and go run it for me. And I don't care how it happens. Just OpenShift, take it and run it for me. Whereas on Kubernetes, you push down to the developer, you have to build your own container, right? And if developers are building their own container, all we've done is add another step to them, right? Another area that they have to work on and develop, et cetera. OpenShift just makes it easy, just runs the code for you, right? There's other things like log aggregation and telemetry, things like idling, and what we're working on now is actually a more intelligent scheduler, right? Kubernetes scheduler is very pluggable, right? So OpenShift just brings takes something that's really awesome and then makes it even more awesome.
Got it.
I think that's a really good point, because really what we're seeing for a big benefit around OpenShift is it's kind of lowering the barrier to entry for a lot of customers in the container space. So, we've worked with me personally, I've worked with maybe 15 different organizations adopting containers. And they might have one or two guys that are using Docker or even spun it up or even gotten pretty advanced with it. But typically the overall majority of their staff is not familiar with the nuances of Docker or containers in general. So with OpenShift, for instance, they can just bring their code with a standalone binary, or they can bring their actual their source code, and with OpenShift tooling, we can compile that, we can deploy the containers and then run those for them at scale. And they don't need to ever have to know or care about any of the nuances of Docker or Kubernetes or any of the other technologies involved.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So one thing I always ask is, for anyone that wants to try some of these technologies, right? So Talking Tech's all about emerging technology in the government. So what are some things Red Hat's doing, or some examples of, have you done workshops or pilots? Like, how are typically people getting their hands on technologies like Kubernetes and even OpenShift and comparing the two?
Yeah, there's definitely a few things. So Kubernetes itself has some Hello World type stuff you can go run. They also have something called Minikube, which is basically a binary where you can run Kubernetes as a binary on your laptop. Red Hat has developed a free program. If you go to developers.redhat.com, you can sign up for free and get our CDK, which is basically a virtual machine that has OpenShift and Kubernetes and everything all built in for you. That's totally free to sign up for the developer account. And we also have OpenShift Online, which has been running for quite a few years. Pre-Docker, we had actually run over 2 million apps using OpenShift Online. So it just went free using Docker and Kubernetes a couple months ago. They can go on, use that for free as well. It doesn't have all the advanced features like the Elasticsearch logging, Kibana logging. It doesn't have some of the metric stuff, but it has all the source to image functionality that you would need to go get running with pods. So you can go use that. Also, for a lot of customers, we've done workshops where you basically show up and either run OpenShift in a cloud environment, which they can access on their laptop, or we actually bring laptops for them. So there's quite a different number of options for them to get started.
And to add to that, I mean, a lot of folks get a lot of benefit out of just touching it, right? So we can show you demos, you can watch the videos, et cetera. The workshops are great because even someone who's never written a line of code in their life can actually deploy an application to OpenShift with just a few mouse clicks, which is awesome. The other thing is, in the latest version of OpenShift, OpenShift version 3.3, we have a command in it called OC cluster up. Probably nerdy to say this, but my favorite command. And that is literally, you run OC, which is the command line, cluster up, and that will launch a full OpenShift cluster on your laptop. And just using Docker engine and soon to be the CRAO spec. And there it is, there to play with. It's completely ephemeral. You run it, and then when you're done with it, OC cluster down, it blows it all away, and releases the resources back. So to get started is, have no excuse not to.
Okay, great. Well, you heard it here first. OC cluster, Chuck's favorite.
OC cluster up.
OC cluster up, your favorite command line. John, Chuck, I appreciate you joining us today. We like to keep Talking Tech short. We encourage you to contact us anytime at talkingtech@redhat.com or visit us for any of the other episodes upcoming. So thanks very much for your time, and we'll talk to you again soon.